Did you know that in 1949, a man named George Orwell predicted that the government would watch you through a screen in your living room, and now you paid $600 to install 5 of them yourself? The television was supposed to be the end of privacy. The internet was supposed to be the final nail in the coffin. But here's what nobody told you. The real threat isn't that someone is watching. It's that you forgot you ever had the right to disappear. There was a time, not that long ago, when a man could walk into a new city with nothing but the clothes on his back and a fake name. And by sunset, he'd have a job, a room, and a life that had nothing to do with who he was yesterday. No background checks, no credit score, no digital footprint stretching back to the day you were born. You could vanish into the crowd like smoke, and the crowd would swallow you whole. That world is gone now, and the people who killed it want you to believe it was always a fantasy. They'll tell you privacy is old-fashioned. They'll say only criminals and conspiracy theorists care about being anonymous. They'll remind you that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And while they're saying this, they're building the most sophisticated surveillance apparatus in human history, and you're helping them pay for it, piece by piece, app by app, convenience by convenience. This isn't a story about technology. This is a story about control. And it starts long before you ever held a smartphone in your hand. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the internet. Not the beginning of computers. The real beginning. The moment when someone first realized that knowing everything about you was worth more than gold. In the late 1800s, if you wanted to ruin a man, you had 2 options. You could shoot him, or you could destroy his reputation in the town square. Both required effort. Both required proximity. You had to be there, in the flesh, to do the damage. But then something changed. The Industrial Revolution didn't just create factories. It created something more insidious. It created records. Before the assembly line, before mass production, before the corporation as we know it, work was personal. You knew your employer. He knew you. Your reputation was built face to face, handshake by handshake. If you were a carpenter, people knew your work because they saw it with their own eyes. If you were a thief, people knew that too, because someone caught you red-handed. There was no database. There was no file. There was just your name and what people remembered about you. But when factories started swallowing thousands of workers at a time, something had to change. How do you manage 5,000 men when you've never met any of them? How do you know who to trust? The answer was simple. You start writing things down. And once you start writing things down, you create something dangerous. You create a permanent record. The first personnel files appeared in the early 1900s. They were simple. Your name, your address, your job, your pay. But then, someone had a clever idea. What if we also wrote down when you were late? What if we noted when you complained? What if we tracked every little deviation from the perfect worker? Suddenly, you weren't just an employee. You were a file. And that file followed you everywhere. This was the birth of the modern surveillance state. But nobody called it that. They called it efficiency. They called it management. They called it progress. And workers accepted it because they didn't understand what they were giving up. They thought it was just paperwork. They didn't realize they were trading their ability to disappear for a paycheck. Now let's jump forward to the 1930s. The world is in ruins. The Great Depression has gutted the economy. Men are standing in bread lines, desperate for work, willing to do anything to feed their families. And in the middle of this chaos, the government makes a promise. Give us your information, and we'll give you security. We'll give you a safety net. We'll make sure you never starve. It was called Social Security, and to get it, all you had to do was register, give the government your name, your date of birth, your work history. In return, they'd give you a number. a 9-digit identifier that would follow you for the rest of your life. At the time, it seemed reasonable. The economy had collapsed. People were dying in the streets. What choice did they have? But here's what they didn't tell you. Once you have a number, you're no longer a person. You're an entry in a ledger. You're a data point. You're trackable. And the promise was clear. This number would only be used for Social Security. It would never be used for identification. It would never be shared. It would never become the key that unlocks every door in your life. That promise lasted about 20 years. By the 1950s, your Social Security number was everywhere. Banks wanted it. Employers demanded it. The government required it for taxes. And suddenly, that number you were told would only be used for retirement benefits was the skeleton key to your entire existence. Without it, you couldn't work. You couldn't open a bank account. You couldn't rent an apartment. You couldn't even die properly, because the government needed to know you were gone so they could stop sending checks. This is how it always works. First, they ask politely. They tell you it's optional. They promise it's for your own good. And then, slowly, quietly, it becomes mandatory. And by the time you realize what you've given up, it's too late to get it back. But the Social Security number was just the beginning. The real nightmare started when someone figured out that information isn't just useful, it's profitable. In the 1960s, credit bureaus were born. Companies like Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion realized they could make money by collecting information about you and selling it to anyone who wanted to know if you were trustworthy. They tracked your debts. They tracked your payments. They tracked every financial decision you'd ever made, and they turned it into a 3-digit number that would determine whether you could buy a house, get a car, or even land a job. And you had no say in it. You didn't sign up for this. You didn't consent. These companies just started collecting information about you, and there was nothing you could do to stop them. If you wanted to participate in the economy, you had to let them watch. You had to let them judge. You had to let them turn your entire financial life into a product they could sell to the highest bidder. This was the moment when privacy stopped being a right and started being a luxury. If you were rich enough, you could hire lawyers to protect your information. You could create shell companies. You could hide behind layers of bureaucracy. But if you were ordinary, if you were just trying to get by, you were exposed. Every mistake you ever made was written down. Every late payment, every bounced check, every moment of financial weakness was recorded and weaponized against you. And the worst part? They convinced you this was normal. They convinced you this was just how the world works. They told you that credit scores were necessary, that background checks were reasonable, that surveillance was the price of security. And you believed them, because what choice did you have? Now let's fast forward to the 1990s. The internet arrives, and at first, it looks like freedom. It looks like the answer to everything. You can be anyone you want online. You can reinvent yourself. You can create a new identity with a few keystrokes. The early internet was anonymous. It was wild. It was chaotic. And for a brief, beautiful moment, it looked like technology might actually give you back the right to disappear. But that moment didn't last long. The corporations saw the internet and they saw something different. They didn't see freedom. They saw opportunity. They saw the biggest surveillance machine ever created, and all they had to do was convince you to use it. So they offered you convenience. They offered you connection. They offered you free services that were so useful, so addictive, so perfectly designed to integrate into every corner of your life that you forgot to ask what you were giving up in return. Google didn't charge you money for search. They charged you in data. Facebook didn't charge you money for connection. They charged you in surveillance. Amazon didn't charge you money for convenience. They charged you in behavior tracking. Every click, every purchase, every search, every message, every photo, every location. Every moment of your digital life was collected, analyzed, packaged, and sold. And the genius of it was that they made you complicit. They made you feel like you were choosing this. They gave you terms of service agreements that were hundreds of pages long, written in legal language designed to be incomprehensible, and they put a little checkbox at the bottom that said, "I agree," and you clicked it. Because if you didn't click it, you couldn't use the service. And if you couldn't use the service, you couldn't participate in modern life. This is the trap. They didn't take your privacy by force. They made you hand it over voluntarily. They made you believe you were getting something valuable in return. And by the time you realized what you'd lost, they'd already built a cage so sophisticated, so invisible, so woven into the fabric of daily existence, that escaping it would mean abandoning the modern world entirely. But here's the thing they don't want you to understand. The surveillance isn't about catching criminals. It's not about preventing terrorism. It's not about making your life easier. It's about control. It's about prediction. It's about making sure you never do anything unexpected, anything rebellious, anything that might disrupt the smooth functioning of the machine. Think about how the system works now. You wake up in the morning and your phone knows you're awake because it tracked your sleep patterns. You check your email and the algorithm decides what you see first. You scroll through social media and the feed is curated based on everything you've ever clicked, everything you've ever liked, everything you've ever hesitated over for more than 2 seconds. You leave your house and your phone tracks your location. You drive to work and cameras record your license plate at every intersection. You buy coffee and the transaction is logged, analyzed, added to your consumer profile. You arrive at work and you badge in, marking the exact moment you entered the building. You sit at your computer and every keystroke is potentially monitored. Every website you visit, every email you send, every bathroom break that lasts longer than the average. You think you're working, you think you're just doing your job, but you're also generating data. You're feeding the machine. You're proving, minute by minute, that you're productive, compliant, predictable. You leave work and the surveillance continues. You shop online and the algorithm recommends products based on your browsing history, your purchase history, your demographic profile, and the profiles of millions of people who are statistically similar to you. You watch a show and the streaming service tracks what you watch, when you pause, when you rewind, when you turn it off. You order food and the app knows your preferences better than you do, because it's been watching you longer than you've been watching yourself. You go to bed, and your phone sits on the nightstand, listening, waiting, ready to activate at the sound of your voice. And the whole cycle starts again, day after day, year after year. A perfect loop of observation and data collection that never stops, never sleeps, never forgets. This is the world they built, and they built it so gradually, so incrementally, that you never noticed the walls going up around you. Every new app was just a small convenience. Every new device was just a small upgrade. Every new feature was just a small improvement. But small things add up. And now you're living in a panopticon that would make Orwell weep, and you paid for it with your own money. But let's talk about why they want this. Let's talk about what they're really after. The old way of controlling people was expensive. You needed police, you needed soldiers, you needed enforcers who could physically stop you from doing things the powerful didn't want you to do. But physical control is messy. It's visible. It creates resistance. People fight back when they can see the chains. The new way is elegant. The new way is invisible. The new way doesn't stop you from doing anything. It just makes sure you never want to do the wrong thing in the first place. It's about prediction. If they know everything about you, they can predict what you'll do next. And if they can predict what you'll do next, they can shape the environment around you to nudge you in the direction they want you to go. This is behavioral economics weaponized. This is psychology turned into a control mechanism. They don't need to put you in prison. They just need to make sure you never think thoughts that would lead you to challenge the system. And the way they do that is through constant surveillance and constant manipulation. Think about how social media works. You post something. The algorithm decides who sees it. If your post is controversial, if it challenges the narrative, if it makes people uncomfortable, the algorithm suppresses it. Not because a human being made a decision, because the machine learned that controversy hurts engagement metrics, and engagement metrics are what makes money. So your voice is silenced, not by censorship, but by mathematics. You're free to speak. You're just not free to be heard. Or think about credit scores. You want to buy a house. The bank pulls your credit report. But they don't just see your payment history. They see everything. They see where you shop. They see what you buy. They see who you associate with. Because in the age of big data, everything is connected. And if the algorithm decides you're a risk, you don't get the loan. Not because a human being judged you, because the numbers said no. And you can't argue with numbers. You can't appeal to the humanity of a machine. This is the future they're building. A world where every decision about your life is made by algorithms trained on the data they collected by watching you. A world where free will is a myth because the system knows you better than you know yourself. A world where rebellion is impossible because rebellion requires the ability to be unpredictable, and unpredictability requires privacy. And this is why they hate your privacy. Privacy is the enemy of control. Privacy is where rebellion is born. Privacy is where you get to be human, messy, contradictory, impossible to categorize. Privacy is where you get to change your mind without the system updating your profile. Privacy is where you get to fail without it being recorded forever. Privacy is freedom. And they can't let you have that, because if you have privacy, you have power. You have the power to disappear, the power to reinvent yourself, the power to start over, and that terrifies them. So what do? How do you fight back against a system this vast, this sophisticated, this deeply embedded in every aspect of modern life? The answer isn't simple. There's no app that will save you. There's no service you can subscribe to that will make you invisible. Because the problem isn't technological. The problem is philosophical. The problem is that you've been taught to believe that privacy is selfish, that anonymity is suspicious, that wanting to disappear means you have something to hide. But that's a lie. Privacy isn't about hiding. It's about autonomy. It's about maintaining the space between who you are and who the system wants you to be. It's about refusing to let every moment of your life be monetized, analyzed, and weaponized against you. The first step is to understand what you've lost. You need to remember that there was a time when people lived entire lives without being tracked, when you could move to a new city and become someone new, when your past didn't follow you like a shadow, when mistakes could be forgotten. That world existed, and the fact that it's gone now isn't inevitable. It's a choice that was made for you, but a choice nonetheless. The second step is to start taking back small pieces of your privacy, one decision at a time. Delete the apps you don't need, turn off location tracking, use cash instead of cards, have conversations face-to-face instead of through screens, read physical books, write letters, meet people in person, live parts of your life offline. These things sound quaint. They sound old-fashioned. They sound like the advice of someone who doesn't understand the modern world. But that's exactly the point. The modern world is designed to make privacy impossible, so living with privacy requires you to step outside the modern world, even just a little bit, even just sometimes. The third step is the hardest. You have to be willing to be inconvenient. You have to be willing to lose access to services that require surveillance. You have to be willing to explain to people why you don't use certain apps, why you don't carry your phone everywhere, why you care about this thing that everyone else has accepted. And you have to be ready for them to think you're paranoid, or weird, or difficult. But here's the truth. You're not paranoid. You're paying attention. And the people who think privacy doesn't matter are the ones who haven't realized that the cage is already built around them. The right to disappear isn't just about anonymity. It's about the right to be forgotten, the right to start over, the right to make mistakes without them being carved into stone. It's about being human in a world that wants to turn you into data. And every time you choose privacy, even in a small way, you're fighting back. You're asserting that you're more than a profile, more than a data point, more than a product to be bought and sold. They want you to believe that privacy is dead, that surveillance is inevitable, that this is just how the world works now. But nothing is inevitable. Everything can change, and it starts with you remembering that you have the right to disappear.